Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a really special guest joining me, Larisa, your go-to real estate expert here in the Pacific Northwest. Larisa has helped over 150 families find their dream homes with a killer combo of financial savvy, strategic thinking, and a whole lot of heart. Whether you're a first-time buyer looking for your forever home or you're just curious about the real estate market, this conversation is packed with insight. So let's dive in. See you at the top. Hello, Larisa.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Thank you for making time to see me. And you're looking spectacular.
Thank you.
And the background is awesome too. So we're going to talk real estate today.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Sure. All right. So number one, how would you describe the current real estate market in Washington, especially for first-time buyers?
Yeah, so our market is so interesting because it's very dynamic right now. We don't have what I could label as one specific market for kind of the greater Seattle area. We have all these little micro markets. I'll give you an example. A listing in Maple Valley that's $900,000 may take a week or two to sell, versus one in Tacoma that's $450,000. That first-time home buyer market is going to be multiple offers. I had one last weekend, 7 offers above asking price, highly competitive. So those first-time home buyers, the houses that typically fit in their bracket, it's very challenging right now. It's still very competitive. You have to have that quick time frame, sharp negotiation in order to make that happen.
Awesome. So what trends are you seeing when it comes to pricing, competition, and interest rates across the state?
Yeah, so I'll start with the last one first. So interest rates, we're still seeing them hover right around 7. I have seen some down lower. People are buying down points. There's creative financing things that people can do. So it's really important to partner with a strong local lender on that end. With respect to kind of the trends, though, for the most part, we're seeing things be pretty quick. Can you ask the question one more time?
Oh, sure. What trends are you seeing when it comes to pricing, competition, and interest rates across the state?
Yeah, so trends in terms of kind of like where we're pricing, for the most part, we're pricing right at where the market is meeting us. We had a little while back where we were able to price just slightly above and still kind of see that activity. And while we can do that in some instances, for the most part, pricing trends we're staying right at where the market is kind of indicating. And what we're seeing, interestingly enough, is almost identical to 2024 pricing. So right now in 2025, we're kind of about the same in terms of pricing and kind of where our market is positioning us.
So what determines pricing when it comes to real estate?
Yeah, so a couple different things. We look at the condition of the property. We're looking at the features, kind of the layout that is going to make sense, and then comparable properties to that. And so there are certain things that make impacts, such as a 3-car garage versus a 2-car garage, a new kitchen versus an outdated kitchen. But for the most part, we're still looking at what everything else around is selling and kind of looking at what buyers are buying. That's how I always like to phrase it. Are buyers buying the white kitchen? And if so, that's what we're now having to price against. So that's kind of how we look at the pricing overall when it comes to condition. And then, of course, there's always still an appraisal. So regardless of what the market does, even in that, for example, 7-offer situation, we can only accept an offer at a certain level because the bank valuation, that appraisal still has to come in.
Could you define an appraisal for people that are not familiar with real estate?
Yeah.
Technologies and stuff?
Absolutely. So when you get a loan or secure a loan on a property, whether that's conventional, FHA financing, any type of financing, the bank is still going to do their independent valuation. You may think, well, I'm using a loan officer. Same thing. They're still going to have an independent valuation of that property. So that person is going to come in, do their analysis, do their appraisal valuation, and then give us a number that will either support the purchase price that you've put together or is going to be against that. And there's a potential opportunity to lower the price because of that.
Awesome. All right. Number 3, are there noticeable differences between buying in urban areas like Seattle versus small towns or suburbs?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, with respect to like city limits necessarily, I wouldn't say as much. The like Seattle versus something that's right on the cusp of Seattle doesn't impact you as much as driving distance and school districts, interestingly enough. So, there are huge differences in terms of just the speed of the market. Let's look, for example, at a price point that's 1.2 million. 1.2 million in downtown Seattle is going to fly off the shelves. It's going to go so quickly, your head's going to spin. 1.2 million though in Maple Valley might sit for a minute. And in Puyallup is going to be on the market for months. You're going to get a lot bigger house, much more there the further out you go, but the market demand just isn't there because the job market's not there for it.
Economic disparities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you mentioned something about school districts. I know a lot of families.
Yeah.
That's a big factor when it comes to where my kid's going to go to school. If I'm going to live here for 30 years, I need a solid school district for my kids to go to. Oh, it's an interesting perspective. Okay, let's move on to part two where we're talking about buying and selling smart. What are some of the most common mistakes buyers make when searching for a home?
So most commonly I see buyers that say, I want to be in specifically Auburn. That is a big mistake that I see people make, not because of being in a specific area, but what we're looking at is where are you going to get the most value for what you're wanting and where you need to be. So if you are looking in, let's just use that example, Auburn, I always like to ask a few additional questions. Why is it Auburn? What is the commute time looking like? What is the neighborhood feel that you're wanting? And we might be able to look at a city or suburb area that's very, very close, that's not exactly Auburn. It could actually save you a lot of money by moving just slightly outside of a hard parameter that you set. So that's the biggest thing, being too strict on their kind of must-haves list and not being flexible in order to save money and still get exactly what they want.
So allow yourself some leeway when searching for a house, for the perfect house.
Yeah, so I would say come up with what are the things that are most important for you in terms of how you want to live your life. So another example could be garages even. I see people that say, I have to have a 3-car garage. Well, why? Okay, well, I got to have a gym and I've got to have, a space for my car and I got to have a tool space, right? But a shed and a 2-car garage could work the same, and that just saved you $25,000. So that's a big difference, and we really want to get to the root of how are you going to use your home? What areas do you need to be near? And that's going to save you money.
Awesome. What should sellers do to make their listings stand out in a competitive market?
Couple of things. One, take the advice of your realtor. It is so important that the house is clean and has fresh paint. If you do nothing else, clean it and get fresh paint. Those are going to be the number one dollar return items for you that is going to really make you stand out. The next thing really comes down to how that home is positioned marketing-wise compared to other homes, again, what buyers are buying. So if other homes around you all have a certain feature or are staged a certain way, you want to be doing the same.
Interesting. So you have to clean your house, and this means both internal and external.
Absolutely. It is one of the biggest things when buyers walk in. It's the funniest thing. When buyers walk in, one of the first things that they start noticing is all those small deferred maintenance items. They might not see it. They might not notice that the baseboard's dirty. They might not notice the grout behind the sink is dirty, but subconsciously they are starting to think this house is not taken care of. And those little things really impact the value they see in the home.
I always refer to that as generally tweaking aesthetics.
Yep.
Awesome. So how important is timing in Washington real estate? Are there certain seasons that are better for buying or selling?
Yeah. So overall, there's not going to be one season that is better or one season that's worse. I will say there are weeks of the year, though, that are better or worse. For example, the week after the first of the year, everybody is fresh, excited, listing their homes. Great opportunity for buyers because there's not a lot of buyers yet in the market, and there's a whole lot of fresh listings that just came on and are ready and motivated to sell because they haven't been able to through the winter. Another example in terms of quote unquote not great weeks would be the week of the 4th of July. Kids just got out of school. Everybody wants to hang out. Nobody wants to either list their house or sell their house. And then the week of Christmas. The week of Christmas, though, is interesting because if you are a seller and you're on the market, those buyers have tons of opportunity to get a great deal because those people are very, very motivated.
Interesting. I always thought the idea of people not doing anything after the first, not specifically for real estate, was because they spent so much money shopping for items over Christmas and New Year's, and they just don't feel like they have money to buy a new home. I don't know if this is what's happening in the real estate world.
I don't see it so much on the buyer side. I do see though, to your point, a big influx right after tax season. So we see our spring market and tax season kind of line up often because people are getting their return, realizing they have a little bit extra that they can have as their safety net or as their closing costs. And so there's a little bit more buyer confidence around that time of year.
And I'm imagining to be an effect, I don't know anything about real estate, but the core principles I'm getting here is you have to diligently study patterns. Like if you're at home, you're studying, okay, seasons, the market patterns and stuff, and you're always educating yourself in order to understand, okay, most people have money at this time of the period, so maybe this is the best time to list houses and whatnot.
Absolutely. So my background's in economics, and I think it works so incredibly well to have that background because we're always future casting what the human behavior is going to be of the next step, right? And so it's not just what just happened, it's what just happened, what's happening economically, what are the trends. It's all that together that's really fun to be able to stay on top of. And like you said, in all the micro markets.
Yeah.
Seattle is different than Puyallup, right?
Yeah, you have to do a lot of due diligence, a lot of studying and stuff to master your market. And if you don't mind me asking, where did you get your economics degree?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Washington in Tacoma.
Oh, interesting. Go Huskies. I'm a Husky myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, awesome stuff. So, let's see. Part 3. So, what advice do you have for buyers looking to purchase properties for adult family home or as rental investments?
Yeah, so for adult family homes specifically, again, we've got to look at what are going to be the cost saving opportunities for you, because typically you're wanting to have as many clients in there comfortably as possible in order to have a really successful home. That means we want to look at larger bedrooms for 2-room occupancies. We also know that 5-bedroom and 6-bedroom homes are typically extremely expensive. They do not get you what you really need by the time you look at the numbers and you crunch them. So what we're going to be looking at is, again, rooms or houses that are smaller, that minimal modifications can be made to make it exactly what you're wanting. So for adult family homes, you're almost always going to be looking at modifications. If you can find one that is ready to go, you got to jump on it because that is very, very rare.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So are there any specific zoning requirements or layout features buyers should be aware of when purchasing for business use?
So for businesses, it depends on the business. An adult family home you can run in a residential zone as long as there's no HOAs. If you're looking at other types of businesses, you may need to look at mixed use zoning or commercial zoning, depending on what it is. Washington State has different requirements around clients that are by appointment only versus clients that can walk in. So it's super important that you're doing the research on the type of business you have and then matching that up with the zoning requirements in that specific area.
For those people that don't know, could you break down what HOA is and what zoning means?
Yeah.
Someone might be like, what's zoning? HOA, what does that mean?
Absolutely. So an HOA is going to be a homeowners association. Think suburban neighborhood that has a community and they have a set of rules that you have to follow. You know, mow the grass, no junk cars out front. That is an HOA. They will have rules. Sometimes HOAs are really minimal in cost, but because of the rules, they almost never allow you to run a business out of your home. Now, zoning is what a city would put together. So a city planning department is going to say, in these areas, we allow commercial use. In these areas, we want exclusively residential. You are actually able to just search online for the zoning for the specific city you're looking for, and you'll see this really beautifully colored map with all these different areas, and that's the zoning map.
Oh, thank you very much for breaking that down. Have you worked with clients who are buying homes for multi-generational living? What should they prioritize?
Absolutely. So multi-generational living is some of my favorite type of clients because they're really unique type of properties we look for. We're getting creative, again, keeping the dollar in mind. Walking into a home that is perfectly ready for 2 living situations is really challenging to find and usually pretty expensive to find. So what we're often looking for is homes that have easy access on 2 different floors, especially since multi-gen living, usually there's one member of the family or a section of the family that needs to have main floor living or no stairs. And so we're looking for homes oftentimes that are like walkout basement homes or something with minimal stairs that allow 2 separate partition spaces that is not currently one with 2 kitchens. Sometimes we'll see, for example, walkout basement. It's effectively a 1-story rambler on the top. That is where maybe the older generation would live. They can walk in, they've got their kitchen, living, bedrooms, bathrooms. Downstairs, though, is where maybe the second generation or second generation would live. They might have access through the main floor, or they might have access around the side entrance. But oftentimes what we're looking for there is a place that has plumbing available where you can put in a kitchen, and then already has bedrooms and bathrooms downstairs and that separate entrance. So expect with multi-gen living, for the most part, you will probably have to make some changes, like putting in a kitchen or kitchenette, and also making sure you have access.
Interesting. I always thought that the older folks would want to live downstairs and not upstairs.
Yeah, sometimes they do. There are other floor plans where, so a walkout basement, for example, is one where it is effectively a rambler, and then downstairs is another access point. Garage is typically on the main. However, there are homes, like two-story homes, where yes, the older generation would live on the main floor, and then there's additional bedrooms and baths up. In Washington State, depending on where we are, funny enough, cities have different infrastructure, different building ages. Depending on where we are, we will see different types of homes. So right now we're sitting in Federal Way, kind of this Federal Way, Des Moines area. We see a lot of the walkout basement style, so it makes it perfect for people to convert.
Interesting. Can you walk us through the home buying process in Washington from making an offer to closing the deal?
Yeah, so whenever I meet with a client, I walk through this whole map of this. So I don't have my illustration with you, and I'll do the very best I can. From the first part, you make an offer. Of course, there's all the steps ahead of that, but as soon as you make an offer, we enter into negotiations. Hopefully, we're the only one that they're negotiating with. So we might have some small tweaks. Ideally, we get you to a mutual contract, is what it's called, as soon as possible. At that point in time, that effectively starts our 30-day time frame. 30 days is typically how long it takes to go through escrow or the closing process. So as soon as that happens, escrow is opened. This is a third-party company that we're going to work with to help us through the transition process, moving that title into the buyer's name. Through that process, we'll open title. You'll have earnest money that gets deposited. Earnest money, think of like a good faith deposit in a way. Excuse me. So think of it like a good faith deposit. Effectively, it is going to be an amount that you put down to reserve the home, and it stays protected through your inspection if you have a home inspector. It stays protected through your financing, that appraisal if you get that done, or when you get that done, all the way through the end of the process. The only time you really run the risk of that or losing that earnest money is if you decide to walk away, and it's not one of your protected contingencies.
So earnest money comes from the buyer?
Yeah, so it comes from the buyer, and it'll eventually go towards their down payment. If they're using a down payment program, and if the seller's paying their closing costs, they might even get that back. I've had clients that at closing table, they don't have to owe anything, and in fact, they receive a check for their earnest money balance.
Interesting.
So they're really, truly zero down.
Oh, interesting. I had no idea there was I always knew there was a way you could make a deposit, like put 10% down, 20% down, but I never knew that it was different from earnest money.
Yeah, so with respect to amounts you put down, earnest money is typically about 1% of the purchase price. There's no set number. That's just typically what we see. And then in terms of your down payment, we see that anywhere ranging from 0% to really as much as you want to do. Most first-time home buyers are doing 3.5%.
Oh, interesting. What should buyers expect in terms of paperwork, inspections, and closing costs?
Yeah.
Kind of walk through that, but could you kind of break down the amount of paperwork inspection? Because most people are like, oh man, I have to deal with so much paperwork. So how do you guys help people go through the paperwork and stuff?
So there's probably not as much paperwork as you think. There is certainly contracts that we walk you through that makes sure you understand everything you're signing up front. And then at closing, when that title transfers to you, I'm pretty sure there's more paperwork for buying a car than there is for buying a house. But you'll go through and sign that. So really there's only 2 times where you'll go through and sign paperwork. And it's not hours and hours of this. This is 15 minutes and then 30 minutes later of signing and making sure you understand what you're signing. In terms of closing costs, so in Washington State, sellers have the option to pay for your realtor. And so for the most part, we're still seeing buyers that don't have to pay for their real estate expenses because the seller is paying for that. Always double check with your realtor. It's going to depend on the situation, but that is what we're seeing. So for your closing costs, really, we're seeing loan origination fees, which depends on your lender. Again, some have 0, some have 1%. And then you'll have your title and escrow fees. And so those can be anywhere between $1,500 and $4,000, just depending. So I see usually home buyers are in that $5,000 to $7,000 range in terms of their closing costs specifically. Now, because we are in a market where interest rates are high, a lot of buyers are also paying down rates. And so we see those kind of creep up. But we are also in a market, for the most part, where we're able to ask a seller to help pay for those costs.
Again, for the layman out there, because I'm always looking out for the layman.
Yeah.
What is the definition of escrow?
Yeah.
And and also what's the definition of equity? The two E's, escrow and equity.
Perfect. So escrow can be used in two different ways. And so I want to explain both so you have clarity and kind of understand moving forward, especially if you do become a homeowner. In the process of purchasing your home, escrow is the account in which your earnest money is held. It's also the team that helps transition you from purchasing the home to owning the home. So it is actually a team that you'll have a name, you'll have a number, you'll know who they are. They sit locally usually. So that is escrow when it comes to buying a home. Now, escrow when it comes to owning a home is different. This is the account that holds your property taxes and your insurance throughout the year. So when you have monthly mortgage payments, it accumulates into this fund, and then every 6 months, it is paid out to the insurance company and the property taxes. So usually your mortgage company handles that, but when we look at having one mortgage payment, it's because your escrow account is paying out those other two.
Yeah, because whenever you look at a statement from the bank for your mortgage, you're like, escrow, what's going on? What is this? What are all these percentages?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's escrow. And then equity. So equity is how much value you actually own in your home. Perfect example of this. If you purchase a $500,000 home and you put zero down, you currently have zero equity until that home starts to grow in value or appreciate in value. Let's say you're a couple years down the road. In our market, typically we're appreciating at about 10% a year. So you could realistically own $550,000 in your home by year 2. But that $50,000, you now have equity. Because you bought it for $500,000, you've grown. Of course, you've paid it down the way. You've paid it down, the mortgage down along the way, but that $50,000 is now your equity in the home.
Interesting. Okay, now that I know. I always knew about equity, but escrow not so much. But now I'm glad you gave those definitions and stuff. How do you personally advocate for your clients during negotiations or when challenges comes up?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is really getting on the good side of the other agent. I want to know everything I possibly can about that seller. I want to know if they're motivated, if they're hurting. I want to know how much room we really have to push some buttons. So let's assume there's no other offers on the table, because that's a very different scenario when we are in multiple offers. For the most part, I'm going to push as many buttons as I can in a nice way to make sure that when we put an offer together, we can do it below asking price and asking for all the bells and whistles that you want, like the washer and dryer and the fridge, maybe a little bit of furniture, and also the timeline you want, and hopefully still getting them to pay your closing costs.
Speaking about multiple offers, what home creates an opportunity to have multiple offers? You think? What are things that people look for to have multiple offers?
I think it shows up in a couple different ways. One, if a home is just immaculate, it is perfectly clean, it is all updated, and it's priced against homes in an area that maybe aren't as updated, so it really stands out for the price. What we're seeing right now is we have a big pool of buyers that have just been waiting for like the perfect one. And when that perfect one comes up, they all jump on it. Not because they haven't been able to jump on others, but just because they want the extra special one. So that we see oftentimes, it's just that kind of perfect one that's sitting there and finally comes on the market. Then we also see when they come up in a certain price point. So when they're in a certain price point in an area that there's just not very many in that price point, that's another time we see a lot of buyers jump. So these are already buyers that have been looking, they've been trying for a while usually, they just haven't been able to find one that fits the price point and the features that they're wanting.
Interesting. And so you always find different kind of buyers. There's the person that's buying for his family, maybe they're trying to have a family, the husband and the wife, or the college roommates together, or they could be the real estate investor too, who buys homes and then sells them after 2 years or something. So you always get a mixture of different buyers in your scenario, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is if you have intentions of keeping the home for longer than 5 years, you don't need to have the one that's perfect. You're going to end up overpaying for it, quite frankly. You would be much better off finding the one that needs a few things to tweak, doing that yourself. Maybe even taking a HELOC to do that yourself. So that would be a home loan after you own the home to be able to make those changes yourself. And that is going to give you the long time return. The other thing to think of, when you are buying a home again, if you're planning on being there for more than 5 years, interest rate long term doesn't matter. If it goes down, you'll refinance. If it goes up, you have a lower rate.
So 5 years is a sweet spot. You always
I see 5 years as a sweet spot. The reason I say that is because in 5 years, if you hated that house, you're going to have so much equity, you won't know what to do with it, and you can sell it and buy something else.
Interesting. All right, moving on to our final section. So what's one piece of advice you give to every client, whether they're buying or selling?
So on the sellers, we take a look at, we can only price your house against what other buyers are buying. We cannot overprice it. We have to just look at what the market is doing, position your home in the best way possible, but we can't change the location. We're not going to change the kitchen. We're going to just price it correctly and then position and market it the best way we can around that. That's what I always do for sellers. For buyers, it's about finding what the absolute must-haves are. So, do you need 4 bedrooms? Can we get away with 3 in an office? Do you need the 4-car garage? Can we get away with 2 in a shop? Those kind of things where we're really looking at what are going to be the things that give you more houses on the market and also save you money long term.
How do you help nervous or first-time buyers feel confident and supported throughout the process?
I think a lot of times for my first-time home buyers, it's just having awareness of what the process looks like. So we do sit down at first and spend about an hour together going through what the whole process looks like. I know I did that quickly now, but really taking time so they feel confident with their loan options, what the market looks like in the specific area, and what the process will look like, feeling like they have empowerment over it. And then we spend a lot of time just looking at houses too. They don't have to jump on the first one they see.
Awesome. The question we have here is what fuels your passion for real estate here in Washington?
Yeah. I genuinely love what I call the sparkle moments. So I see them in a couple different ways. I see sparkle moments when people see hope in something that they can experience, whether that is finding the dream home or feeling empowered that they can actually buy a house because they're the first one in their entire family to get to do that, or feeling relieved over selling a home that has been passed down to them or that they just need to be able to sell to move on to the next phase in their life. Those little tiny moments I live for. I also love that my job is creating connections with people. And that I just think is so much fun to be able to be in the community, really get to know people, educate people, and then see them feel empowered.
Yeah, I think it's a spectacular thing that you create those connections, because when someone buys a home and they end up being there for 20, 25 years, 30 years, they'll always remember you as a person that sold them that home, and all those memories that they cherish in that home, they'll always be associated with you. So I do see what you're.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a hand you the keys and ghost you type person. So I even joke when I'm working with somebody who might be a new client, I'm like, if we don't like each other from day one, I don't want to work with you. You're not going to want to work with me.
Interesting.
Because long term, we're going to be friends.
So are there people? Is that a thing in the real estate culture? Like hand you the keys and ghosts?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think there are more like me where we genuinely want relationships, but there are people that just see people as transactions, and that's really sad, and it just doesn't serve people.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Quick question. I digress. What can you tell me about wholesaling? I've read about wholesaling, and I was thinking about wholesaling a while back, but it kind of looked so sketchy to me. As a real estate person, what do you think about wholesaling?
I'll say I'm not the expert on wholesaling, so I'm going to start there. I know that there are some realtors that do it and do it at a really high level. I think if that's something that you're wanting to get into, you have to find an expert who does that. So, and same with anything. If you're looking at flipping homes, or you're looking at being a first-time home buyer or relocating, you have to find a realtor who's an expert in that specifically. So I can't answer your question on wholesaling. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
I was really weary about how they pushed it as you can make money real. Anything that is make money real fast, to me, I'm always like careful with it.
Yeah.
It goes into the territory of criminality and stuff.
Well, and anytime you have really high reward, you usually have really high risk. And so I'm sure there are people that make incredibly success with that. And at the same time, there's probably a lot of people that lose a lot of money. It's not going to be a get rich quick type thing if you don't have the capital to potentially lose.
So this, Larissa, this video is going to go out to the masses, and people that are interested in buying a home and want to talk real estate. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me is through social. So my Instagram is at @LarissaButler_realtor. You can also reach out to me through my website. It's LarissaButlerRealty.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Larissa, for availing yourself today. I'm glad that you showed up, and you are such a natural, and you made the whole interaction actually pretty awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.